Thank you guys for being here. I'm Jay, and I operate the San Luis local, San Luis Valley Seed Exchange, and we have an event every spring at Joyful Journey, and it's a free and public seed swap, and we have speakers doing education around regenerative and local farming and agriculture. And I just am really grateful to have this panel here for you all to get to listen to today. And I'm going to quickly introduce everybody, and then we'll get into this. In order of seating is Liza Marin. She's the founder of the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, which works to foster an equitable local food system with an incubator farm park at on the Rio Grande and an aggregation and distribution hub, which you guys have probably heard of, the Valley Roots Food Hub. You can get a lot of really excellent regional food from there. Next is Bob Petterson. He has been a long-time food sovereignty advocate, and he runs a farm in Salida and is the founder of Beyond Organica, which creates a lot of soil nutrients and compost things for your garden. Next is Micah Roseberry. She's been an organic farmer for over 25 years. She is out of Taos, New Mexico, operates a nonprofit with multiple projects down there, from Farm to School program, a CSA, which aggregates food from 15 local farmers and gets it to the community, a farmer and rancher co-op, which takes ranchers' beef and gets it directly to families. Next, we have Devon Pena, who is the founder of the Acequia Institute out of San Luis, and he has a little page in here. He's a biodynamic farmer, seed saver, plant breeder, and philanthropist. The Acequia Institute has been dedicated to supporting environmental, food, and justice movements throughout the area. And then there is Amanda Labin, of the Colorado Land Link. She's the director of that since last year, and she has been expanding its programming and outreach that has increased landowners reaching people seeking land to farm on. And I have a booth, the Local Foods Coalition has a booth, and the Guidestone Land Link has a booth all up by the road over there. So come see us. We have food that we're giving away, hemp seeds we're giving away, and if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the table, it's just, there's abundance from the garden, and we want to share it and spread it around. So the first bit of this is, I'm really curious, who here wants to be, I want to just see a raise of hands. Who here wants to be 100% reliant on the grocery stores for your food? Who wants to be 100% reliant on yourself for your food? Who wants to be reliant on their neighbor for their food? Who wants to be 100% reliant on their region for their food? All right, great, then you're in the right place. I want to talk about the role that local food plays in a resilient food shed. And so my first question here is, what does it mean, and you guys can just popcorn, what does it mean to be reliant on your local food?
Okay, well, I'll give it a try. Liza Marin here. And if you think about poverty as not being able to take care of yourself, then you can think about community wealth as being able to take care of yourself with your food, your water, your energy, that we are strong, resilient, short supply chain communities, that we feed ourselves and take care of ourselves, and that's true community wealth.
Okay. We're doing a lot of reliance on the USDA school lunch program. We're building our agriculture system on that reimbursable funding that we all as taxpayers pay, and we are having food sovereignty by the children getting local grass-fed and finished beef from our local ranchers, carrots from our farmers, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that, the children, along with the water, are our greatest resources. And so I think we really need the young people to be engaged. So to me, that's resilience.
In San Luis, we talk a lot about local slow, and deep. And that has special meaning to us. All our heritage crops are local varieties. And this is Che, by the way. And he's wanted to get a word in edgewise. Also, these heritage crops have to be prepared a certain way to unlock all their nutritional and medicinal power. So, for example, our high elevation short season maize, the concho, gets nixtamalized with wood ash or calcium hydroxide, and then you can dry them out and make chicos del horno, or you can make pozol, or you can make masarina. And when you nixtamalize corn this way, you're opening up all its nutritional possibilities to the human digestive system. We'd like to also talk about deep, therefore, because the germplasm that we grow, and we really are very protective of it, has a very deep heritage. And indeed, this is a white flint, flowery flint corn that has been adapted to 8,000 feet. And high UV radiation and all the rest, all the other conditions that affect the growth of our cultivars. So local, slow, and deep is what we talk about.
Thank you. Amanda Laban here, and I think being reliant on our local food system really goes back to community and being connected to one another, connected to the people growing our food, the people distributing it, the people transporting it, the people aggregating it and cleaning it. And I think that interconnectedness is what makes us more resilient and adaptable over the long term. So, yeah.
And so what direction does our food shed need to move in to be resilient and secure and sovereign? Where do we need to go?
Yeah, I feel that our local food system is first and foremost built on relationships. It's about, I loved in the previous panel when they were talking about progress at the speed of trust. And that's what a strong, resilient local food system looks like. I like to say that our food safety is our relationship with our farmers, because for example, Tom McCracken sitting out here, and I know his practices are respect of the soil and growing food in living soil and being of high integrity to the organic ideal and values. And so for me, that is the food safety that allows me to have that relationship and eat that food with confidence and feed it to my family. And I think that we're working on hub and node connectivity, and so we've been working on building a resilient food hub here, where we're aggregating from about now. Nick Chambers is out there somewhere. He's our founding general manager of the Valley Roots Food Hub, but we started out maybe with $100,000 worth of business, but now in 2022, we're up to $1.5 million worth of business, where 65% of that is going into the pockets of our farmers and ranchers in this food shed. And we've gotten to the place where we have built enough capacity at the Valley Roots Food Hub that we can now reach out to our sister communities like Mountain Roots Food Hub in Gunnison, and the work that's going on in Chaffee County with Guidestone and the Good Food Collective in Durango, and create these supply chains. And we had a relationship down in this lower Arkansas, and that way we're taking our greens and our root crops and our potatoes and the kind of things we grow really well, and we're able to exchange for melons and chilies and tomatoes and other microclimates kinds of food, so that we have these strong short supply chains that are reliable in a crisis, in a climate disaster, in a snowstorm, in a drought, because somebody is in our network is growing and has food available. And COVID brought that to light in a really beautiful way, that when there was no meat in the grocery store, we still had strong relationships with our grass-fed beef producers, and our meat was cheaper than what was out there if you could find it. So there's a lot of hub and node connectivity that I think is a step in the right direction.
100% agreed. And yet, the percentage, I'm curious, what is the percentage of food that is produced regionally of our total food consumption? Any guess?
Not me.
I'm gonna.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say I know in Taos, it's less, farmers market and in general, those sort of markets are less than 0.5%. And they did double in this last year after COVID. And I think it's probably kind of similar. And since I brought up, I'm going to give you the microphone back, but before I brought up the school district, I just found out $6 million that we're purchasing food for our kids, 20,000 of that is New Mexico grown. 20,000 out of 6 million.
Yeah, and actually Ken Meter did do a study in the San Luis Valley about how much we spend on food in the San Luis Valley and what percentage of that is local, and it was very, very small. And this is a 2016 study, so it's increased, and we're working in the right direction. But I love the you vote 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What are you spending your money on? And do we look to our local food shed first when we invest our hard-earned dollars? And that's how it starts, is that we really stand strong on that core value that we're going to support a local living economy and our own producers before we look elsewhere.
So when we have these, this network is the most amazing thing. If you all don't know about it, find out more about it. But if I almost want to say when the trucks stop rolling, this local food will come to us because we've developed these networks. But it's not enough. It's not going to be enough. And so a little bit of getting back to the Jay's question, and my obsession is your backyard. We can grow an amazing amount of our food in our backyards, on our small farms. I'm going to guess that in the Crestone area, there is not one single acre scale garden. The closest thing might be Michael and Lydia. And I want to mention just a minute of food security versus food sovereignty. This is food security. You buy it at the grocery store, you use money from your back pocket or food stamps, and if you don't have money, you go and you get it from the food pantry. It requires the interstate highway system. It requires subsidized food production. It requires corporate grants on scale. That is food sovereignty. It requires access to land. It requires knowledge in your community. It requires water. Of course, in Crestone, we have land and water, but we don't have the rules and regulations that allow us to grow food. You can grow a little food in your backyard in Crestone or maybe out in the Baca, but you're going to pay an enormous amount of money for the water. Food sovereignty shifts some of that and empowers us to in some way take back the localization of access to land, water, and building knowledge in our community. And so if it's 1 or 2% of our food that is local, what can we do to increase that? I think a big part of it is in your backyard and in education for adults, seniors, children, all of us. It took me 20 years and a whole lot of conversations with old men at Taos Pueblo and old Hispanic men to figure out actually how to grow corn. It's not just planting a seed in the backyard, and there's the breeding and everything else that goes along with it. So that's, I'm just going to leave it there for now.
All right. I'm going to make it a little bit vulnerable because we actually had some true resilience this year. Um, Bob had a knee injury, planted a giant field of blue corn,
But I couldn't have done it without
figured out how to do it like with a stick and without bending his knees. And I came actually from Taos to help him irrigate. And I really saw, and he grew a whole bunch of starts for the seedlings for the greenhouses we have in Taos at the schools. So we like did this exchange, even though it was kind of some distance. But you know, we're all pretty vulnerable. It only takes like a small thing to happen, and all of a sudden, you know, it takes so much labor. And farming is already so risky. It's the riskiest business there is. So I just wanted to say that we all have to stick together. And I'm going to move over to the farm and ranch co-op that we're working with, and we're working on helping people increase their production. I'm focused on carrots. I've got a crush on carrots this year. So we're probably growing about, I'd say, 15,000 pounds of carrots, which isn't that many carrots, but it's a lot of carrots. But you have to have a place to store them. You know, the more people that know how to do that and make it equitable and actually, you know, profitable so that you can stay in business. And I'm actually currently looking for a small carrot harvester, if anybody knows of one, besides like 25 people out in the field. But that's what we're looking at, and getting enough refrigeration to store things to be able to sell those out and eat those all winter, along with all the different root crops that we can store. And the same with refrigeration and freezer space for the local ranchers. And most people don't, like a lot of small beginning farmers, barely can get on the land. They don't always have a wash station. They don't always have refrigeration. Some people have to drive all the way to Taos from like Penasco and other small places to put their food into a refrigerated situation. So there's a lot of different things that need to be developed. And I'm just going to say that we happen to have gotten a $1.4 million grant from the New Mexico governor for food security to put a lot of the things I'm talking about into action. And so we're really excited about that. And maybe while I'm also talking about that, I've been working a little bit more. That came through the Food Policy Council, and that was kind of in a way infiltrated by real farmers. And I think that's probably a situation that maybe happens here in Colorado also. And we both have senators that are sitting on the Agriculture Committee with the farm bill that's getting ready to come up. And I think we need our states to work together also. And I want to cross the border. Like New Mexico is not really like another country, but it seems like everybody wants to, you know, work in Colorado or work in New Mexico. But this is all a really big food shed. And we have a really big market there also that is not that far away. So I'd love to collaborate.
So what I see as the foremost barrier is access to land and one's ability to have accessible, affordable, secure land. I see this with the upcoming generation of farmers and not having the capital to be able to purchase land or have a long-term lease on a property where they can allow their business to grow. We were with some farmers last night, and one of them has been running a business for the past 4 years now, and she started on 1/8 of an acre. She's up to 2 acres now. Each one of the last 4 years, she's had to move her business where she's farming. And she talks about not only the emotional and mental toll that takes, but the financial toll, the physical toll. And we have an abundance of land, and we have an upcoming generation of farmers who are very savvy in how they use that land efficiently. And I think really coming to the table with the perspective that farmers are providing a service and that they shouldn't have to beg and plead and pay a lot of money to do what they do. And, I think it's kind of shifting the perspective. If any of you out there own land and, what you could do to offer that for a secure opportunity to a farmer. And, I see a lot of wonderful people out there who have great intentions and would love to see a farmer on their land. But then it gets very real very quickly when someone's on your property. And so it's going back to that relationship piece. And, how can we cultivate the relationships to just move past sort of this is mine, this is yours, and have it be more of a collaborative, just workable effort between all parties.
Well, for those of us who are in the southern part of the valley, the future of food sovereignty has a very specific kind of meaning. And while we, for the most part, have access to land and water already, we don't have access to capital and credit markets. In fact, there's been 7 or 8 generations where maybe like your ancestors had access to USDA loans, we didn't. Maybe your ancestors had access to a good bank deal, we didn't. And the irony of this is that it kind of saved our land and water, is that by not going into debt with the big bankers like, Willie Nelson helping the guys who followed Earl Butt's advice about get big or get out, that didn't work out too well, did it? So for us, the whole question of the future of food sovereignty is about decolonizing several things. First of all, decolonizing our relationship to financial capitalism, and to force a community that includes 1/3 is the descendants of indigenous enslaved in San Luis. A lot of people don't know that. We're an indigenous community. And the damage done possibly by some of your ancestors through settler colonial dispossession of indigenous people, like the 8 million acres of Mexican land grants lost after 1848, that's real damage over the generations that created inequity. And so for us, the future of food sovereignty also has to be about rebuilding equity, a better alignment of equity with all those communities that have been colonized and dispossessed. So that we got to decolonize that relationship to how we finance acquisition of land and water rights. The other thing we need to decolonize is how we farm ourselves. I said this the last time I was here. For very complicated reasons, including the enclosure of our 80,000 acre common lands by a direct descendant of President Zachary Taylor, in 1960 we're kicked off the common lands, basically a sheep, goat, dairy, cow economy, and a polyculture in the corn, bean, squash, fava bean, and brassica fields. And what did we become? By the 1980s, all of a sudden we've become a beef, alfalfa monoculture, export colony. We stopped, us, acequia farmers, stopped growing food for our community. And what's the result of these very, very complicated deformations that I think we can trace back to the impact of settler colonialism is we stopped farming as a polyculture. And everyone just started a monoculture, growing alfalfa, not worrying about the deep seeds that are part of our heritage. So part of our work is to restore that polyculture. Why? Because it's related to the third thing we want to decolonize, our diets, what we eat and how we prepare it. And that's why a moment ago I mentioned nixtamalization to some colleagues about how important it is to unlock all that beautiful potential of our native corn, whether it's red, blue, kind of a beige, and a white and a yellow, doesn't matter. They're all going to be part of our Molino operation. So the project that we're working on approaches the future of food sovereignty in this kind of 3 decolonizing acts that we're working on. And that'll also involve, of course, transforming the oldest business in Colorado, this R&R Market, founded in 1857, never shut down despite 2 fires, converting it from a very successful institution, not just a grocery hardware, but an institution where people came to share news, to get loans. We're reinventing it as a community-owned food co-op with a mutual aid revolving loan fund. We're doing the mutual aid revolving loan fund. We've raised $250,000 for what I envisage as a $1 million endowment from philanthropy. And we're on the road to that. Why? We're going to be gentrified in San Luis. It's finally going to catch up with us. We're seeing signs of that already. We want to give local people who are farmers, especially women, who were cheated by their own families through partable inheritance when that shift occurred from farming to ranching. Oh, women don't ranch. Yes, they do. I learned baling from Veronica Sanchez. Don't tell me women don't ranch, right, or do the farming part of ranching. But that was the ideology, and so we've hurt ourselves as well. There's a whole group of young adult women who want to be farmers to produce food for the market. That's food sovereignty. And also dealing with the violence of financial capitalism while you're at it. So our goal is to give zero interest loans or grants to local women who are going to either be smallholder farmers or food artisans developing value-added product for sale at the market and through our networks along the Front Range, including the low-income food hubs in Denver. One of our products, finally, and I'll move on to get it back to you, Jay, is we are opening up a volcanic rock corn mill to make our own tortillas and masarina. This is a very important part of our project because Mexicans, and I don't know about the word Spanish. You need to let go of that, okay? There are very few Spanish people in San Luis. We're Mexicans, mestizos, indigenous Mexicans, and descendants of the enslaved. And there's a handful of Spanish people, but they're not a big part of the community in terms of the demography. But the tradition of the tortilla is that it's healthier than the flour tortilla for people who have a certain kind of genotype. And so the nutrigenome intersects with the genotype, and you've got issues that have to do. How do you reduce our 15% diabetes rate? That's what we have. 3 times more than the state. You got to decolonize the diet. You got to get people to eat cactus again. You got to get them to eat corn tortillas again. You got to get them to eat nopalito with elk. That's a traditional dish. We're serving that up at our commercial kitchen next year when we finally get that going. So we're going to have a tortilla operation. That's important because Mexicans eat more corn tortillas than any other demographic group. And if they're eating maseca, they're eating herbicide residue. This is a public health issue, and we aim to get a non-GMO organic tortilla in the hands of the people of Colorado and the Upper Rio Grande.
Yeah. So that was all amazing. My next question is, what's really working here as a network in the Valley, as food producers? What's working well here that we want to keep facilitating and keep supporting? And then I'll ask you what's not working well. But first, let's go with what are our successes and what's been done really well. You might not know. You can pass the mic.
Well, I know it's not me. It's what you're doing and what you're doing and what you're doing. It's these building these networks. They are growing and growing and getting stronger. But the local food hub model that you guys are all seem to be working on is working, and that's all you guys talk about.
You guys.
What I was going to say is just that we are all communicating, and I think that's just an amazing thing. Like, we check in with Liza all the time about programs that she's doing. We reach out to the other organizations. Like, my organization's located in Chaffee County, but I've commuted to the Valley to do work for the Food Hub, and then that gets me connected to the people in this community. And then we continue to communicate, and we know that each other are there and doing things, and we're trying to not duplicate efforts and be more efficient. And so, I mean, just in one word, it's that communication. And I think that's really working well, and that we need to continue doing it and not lose that momentum.
So I'll talk about the work of the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, and anybody out there who's with the Local Foods Coalition, why don't you give a shout? Woo! So the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition is the result of listening to the people of our community. And we had a gathering back in 2008 about food security. And people came together and talked about how we are this amazing agricultural area and we don't have access to the food we grow here. We have this big export model. And so we started, anyway, we had this gathering and we expected 10 people to show up and we had like 65 people show up and everybody wanted to keep meeting. So we kept meeting and that's how the Local Foods Coalition got started. We really didn't plan it. It was organically created by the will of the people, the voice of the people wanting access to the rich agricultural region that we have here that we don't. And so we started working on Farm to School. I really appreciate Micah. And I want to say that, you know, Micah, we were on the Ogallala Commons conversation. That's a group that's working on these things. And Guidestone comes and helps our farmers at the Rio Grande Farm Park think about how they can step off the Rio Grande Farm Park as an incubator and step into their own business on their own land through the Land League program. And so we have all these beautiful connections. Bob's with the Seed Exchange, and Devon Pena, he's doing amazing work down there, but we've had crossover with Antonio Garcia and some others that have grown bolita beans down in San Luis because of what the Rich project that they're doing. And we're learning about the beautiful work they're doing with youth so that we can build the Rising Stewards at the Rio Grande Farm Park and teach young people and expose them to agriculture. And so we created the Valley Roots Food Hub to conduct Farm to School because there really was no mechanism between the farm gate and the school plate. And that's really how we started. That hasn't ended up being a really robust part of our work because schools are they have such a scarcity mentality and a scarcity budget. And I really, when we launched the Local Foods Coalition, we actually went to New Mexico where the Farm to Table and the Farm to School movement was strong. And they've been able, through Pam Roy and others like Micah, to actually get money legislated through their state legislator to support schools buying farm products for their schools, which should be an institution. That should be institutionalized. We have a 38-acre farm incubator where we wanted to teach people how to grow food, and we thought young people would be attracted. And instead, the people that we are serving are immigrants who don't have access to land, who are they come from agrarian communities and they know how to grow food. And we've also attracted others. I saw Sharice out here a minute ago. She's part of what's now become the Rio Grande Farm Park Organic Growers Cooperative. So they built this cooperative and are building leadership and direction from what started out as providing space to grow. And then Lois Harvey's out here. She's a nutrition educator teaching people how to cook from scratch and how to cook local foods. What is quinoa and how do you cook it? This amazing protein. And so we teach people how to cook and how to preserve food and how to use the food that they can access to the Valley Roots Food Hub. And then we have an economic development entity that's working on infusing our economy with local foods. And there's so many diverse and rich ways to build this local food economy. But right now, that's kind of the story of the Local Foods Coalition and where we're at today.
Well, as the little southern neighbor down there, I really want to put a vote in for the farmer rancher co-op model. We have so many consumer co-op models, but we need producer co-op models where the tiny percentage of any kind of profitability actually benefits the producers. And so that's really something that we're working on. And I just want to say, as I'm looking at my boots that have this blue cornatole stuck to them from cooking for the school lunch program, like there is a big myth about the schools not having enough money, because I'm doing 1,000 meals a day right on the USDA budget. And I mean, I'm trying to switch up the whole municipal district in Taos also. So I know that story. And I hear that story even at the legislature, begging for, $250,000 for grants for New Mexico grown. But if we're spending $6 million on some kind of person coming, it's a whatever. We have an RFP with a company from Texas that comes up, Labatt, which serves the prison food and serves the school food. And it's kind of a similar story all around because the big conglomerates got a hold of that as an institutional market. And I'm positive that there's money in it. So, you can't just get your commodity. There's these commodities. You can't just get your peanut butter and make a sandwich. You have to get crustables that come from Smucker's factory. And this is in the whole entire, with 25 ingredients, every morning in probably every state. So anyway, I think that those are big markets that we can actually take a hold of. And farmers really want to grow for their grandkids. In general, it's older farmers who are, I've had 6th-generation ranchers, all of us eating together with tears in their eyes about, hey, this is what we really want to do. This is what we've been trying to do. And so, and I would just also want to give a shout out because I stopped at the People's Market in San Luis on the way, and I saw the local honey and, the local zucchini and got to have a tour and see the beginnings of something really strong there. And I think that that's not very far away from here, and that's a really, really strong, production place there. So I'm really hopeful for all this.
They're doing education there, and it's going to grow and grow and grow into a community center and events and a cafe. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and
it's only an hour and a half from here, and it's beautiful.
We want to bring people like her to help us.
Lois,
for our cooking and nutrition program with the local youth. So all the 13 to 18, 19-year-olds that have internships to learn how to farm, acequia style, bring back the polyculture, all of that, they are required to take nutrition and cooking classes so that they can learn how to make the food out of the crops that they're growing. What better model can you have? I mean, it really does connect them to place, allows you to do a revival of heritage cuisine, which is proven to be healthier than going to family death, as I call it. You know what I'm talking about.
So do Devin and Bob have answers to what's working?
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
I think it is working, growing our food in our backyards, and I wish it was working more, I guess. But it does work. It can take as much energy as you want to give it, and it can seem like a burden, or you can trust the food to the relationship. Trust the relationship, not just with the people, but with the land and the plants, and it works to grow food in your backyard. So it takes a little time and money and everything else, but it works. It works for your soul.
Well, you can have land, but doesn't mean you're going to have water. That's the lesson we learned this year.
What's working? I'm going to ask you what's not working.
Well, let me show you what's working. What's working is this, that even though only 5 of us out of 13 had enough water in our acequias, the whole community stepped up, and we've been able to supply now for 3 months a steady flow of locally produced food. But the other thing that's working is how the number of growers who want to get involved is increasing. I have to mention this, though. What's worked is the acequia institution in sharing water scarcity. But there are limits to what we can do, too. And so the next big campaign we're launching is I'm part of a water equity task force, and we're doing an analysis of the Colorado Water Plan. And let's face it, climate chaos is really affecting everyone here in this valley. And what works is for us to, as a valley, not only to defeat Douglas County, actually more important is to augment our own water rights as climate insurance, climate change insurance. So for the acequias, that's easy to do because we have the first 75 water rights in the state, but we lost about half of the CFS associated with those rights. That's why Sanchez Ditch and Reservoir exists. That's why Eastdale 1 and 2 exists. And so what works is to use the state legislature collectively, all of us, to support acequia farmers, tribal farmers, and urban ag, as well as food co-op farmers like those that we have here with the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition. That's what we really need to do, is legislative reappropriation of wealth that we've created and has been taken away. We need to relearn how to keep agricultural wealth in our community. And I think that's what we're learning to do this year with paying the farmers 90% of the sale price is what, and that's really high. And that's putting that agricultural wealth back in the hands of the farmers. We can do that because the market is run by a nonprofit. I understand that. And soon it'll be a nonprofit community food co-op. But we still envision our ability, especially after we build our greenhouse, of keeping those prices down and basically going from the backyard to the market. And that'll help us really increase the freshness of our food and not have to deal with, we'll have refrigeration. So in the market, you'll have your fresh produce walk-in cooler, but the greenhouse is gonna be like 200 feet away from the market where the outlet is. And so that's also, I think, a good part of our plan, and that will work a lot better for us. This is an energy fair, so I will mention that we're putting in a 42 kilowatt system for the 2,000 square foot greenhouse, and we're putting, I don't know if it'll be a Tesla wall, but we're gonna put 3 EV ports. And I think that's not just because they're needed, there's very few here in the valley, but because it'll get people to spend more time with us while their vehicle is recharging. Whether they eat with us or not, at least they'll be in the community a little bit longer. And we don't want to just be another 10 seconds passing through San Luis. And I think responding to the energy economy that's emerging is a positive thing that we can all do. There are not enough EV stations in the valley, and we're going to feed ours with solar. I think you need 3-phase, so be aware of that.
So I'm going to ask 2 questions simultaneously, but one of them is, what's not working? What are the gaps we have in our network, in the infrastructure, in the amount of food, and where are the gaps in nutrition? If we wanted to feed this community, this valley, solely from this valley, what other things are we going to need to produce? Or how much more of the things that we have here? I'm really curious about, the entire nutrition piece.
To follow up a little bit on the acequia that Dr. Pena is mentioning, he's in the oldest community in Colorado, and those ways of managing the water, they didn't come down from Denver, they came up from Mexico.
Good point.
And now I live in Salida area, and the water distribution system is a problem. I offered to share some surplus water with my neighbors for anybody who had food growing downstream from me. I had this year I had plenty of water. Oh my God, you can't do that. You cannot share the water. It is set up a certain way, and do not mess with it, because then you're changing the whole water system that has mostly to do with getting water downstream to cities. And so what's not working is finding ways to cooperate with water I can't call it a ditch system. I have to call it an acequia system, because that's the way I understood of doing it. But it is completely foreign. As soon as you get out of San Luis and you start to come north, they don't understand how to cooperate with water. There's a gauge in the ditch, and you take what's yours, and they take what's theirs, and that's that. And there's no sharing. You're not allowed to share. It's weird. That's not working. So water distribution for food production is not working.
I'm going to just say a little bit about that equity piece, because we've had really big wildfires in northern New Mexico, and I think you guys had some in Colorado also, but we were particularly hit this year. And basically large, not like a lot of small farmers and ranchers were completely wiped out and burned out and lost their cows. And instead of buying those cows and putting those into our system, they were all shipped off to Texas for half price. Like there was really not any there's not been any help for the farmers and ranchers. And in fact, they actually got in trouble for trying to stay on their places. They couldn't come to the meeting with the governor because if they left their ranches, they couldn't get back in because of the police and the National Guard. And so it's really been really devastating. And I think it's amplifying a lot of the problems that are happening in that what you've talked about the colonization and about the funding. Now we're having in New Mexico legislation to stop the ranchers from using their grazing permits that are in the national forest. Well, at least in New Mexico, no one's really taking care of that national forest. I mean, the national forest, the Forest Service caught the forest on fire, and there hasn't been any accountability for that. So I don't know, I just think that we kind of, that's in New Mexico, but I think it's something to take note of, and that we all do need to look at the Farm Bill coming up once
We're
again.
in the same food shed.
Yeah, we're in the same food shed.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're in New Mexico.
Okay, well, a couple things I'll say that aren't working are convenience, our convenience culture, that we want everything at the snap of a finger, and so what we get is factory food that's causing the nutritional deficiencies in our and the health problems in our. And the other piece is centralization of, for example, meat processing, and we don't have the whole USDA system, and we have to have USDA inspection. So poultry producers can't raise chicken. We get chicken from far away for the food hub because we don't have a USDA poultry processing facility here. Our meat packing plants are bottlenecked, and they've all given up USDA because they have enough custom meat to process without needing to do USDA. So at the Valley Roots Food Hub, we're really challenged to have good USDA products that come from our own community, and that's not working. We need to allow our veterinarians to do inspections and find new ways to make certifiable foods available to our communities. Just a piece on the nutrition, the second part of your question. So we are so vibrant here, and people fed themselves forever out of this food shed. You can forage, you can garden, you can fish, you can hunt, you can go to your farmer's market, you can go to your grocery store. We actually had our first harvest festival where we celebrated the food shed here, and we grow everything from asparagus to zucchini and everything in between. Quinoa is a full protein food. We can live. What we can't grow here is chocolate and bananas and coffee. And I don't know, if you want to say, we can't survive without those things, well, then we seek out our fair trade farmers and growers in other parts of the globe that we know have the values of community and decentralization, where they are paying farmers a fair wage, ranchers a fair wage for what they do for their products. And just thinking about the rich, people think that if you look up the Valley Roots Food Hub in the middle of winter, you're not going to find anything. And that's not true. We have bison and yak and beef and chicken and pork and, beans and storage potatoes and carrots and grains and flours. We have the Mountain Ute corn products. We have, Gosar Mountain Mama sausages and flours, and we have a very robust food shed here, but we don't turn to it. Because of convenience, we turn to, don't ever buy your food where you buy your gasoline. And that's what we do.
Except the cloud, perhaps.
Yeah, except for the cloud or maybe the pit stop in Moscow. But besides that, right, okay.
Well, I'm just going to echo exactly what Liza said, because the two things that came to mind are speed and scale. So the speed piece, we are moving so quickly as a culture. Like, I can't believe what has happened since COVID. I am like a very fast-moving person, and I have to keep moving faster, I feel like, to keep up. And that's, we're more efficient because we can do things online. And so instead of actually, slowing down, which maybe some of us did during parts of COVID, I feel like so many of us have sped up. We're trying to be more efficient and do things more quickly and get to more places faster. And so I think we constantly need to check ourselves and slow down and accept that good things take time. And the other thing is this scale. Like, we're all doing work to support this effort. All of these people are doing amazing work, and we could all double the work that we're doing, and it would still be a drop in the bucket. And it's not that we need to be mega businesses doing this, it's just we need more infrastructure, more funding, more people who are connected to this movement to make it work. It shouldn't be an anomaly. Like, we shouldn't be in the minority. This should be how we are functioning. And I feel like, probably what most of us do most of the time is look for funding to keep us moving forward and growing. And, it'd be great if we could all focus on the work that we actually want to be doing instead of asking for money all the time. So that's not working.
I wanted to add a little something about how did we get to a system that's not working for us. And it was decisions that were made maybe almost 100 years ago, going back to the colonialization. But in the last, say, 90 years, there was corporate government decisions to get people off the land into the cities to work in factories. And the phrase of food security came around at that time because people were coming off of the land to go work in the city. You had to guarantee cheap food. And that system is why people were willing to leave the farm. Why would you leave a farm with wonderful food growing to go to the city where no food is grown? Well, corporations started producing the food instead of small farmers, and the prices were suppressed so that factory workers could have cheap, affordable food. It's virtual slavery, in my opinion, and we've all bought into it for generations and generations, and now we're down to, they say 2% of the population grows the food for the rest of us. Well, most of that 2% are driving tractors. They don't know how to grow food. But go back 80 or 100 years, and it was 70% of the people knew how to grow food, and most of them lived on farms. So this system that we are trying to shift has got momentum, but these phrases, food sovereignty, prior to this coming here, I looked up food sovereignty and the foundations and the government. The government is starting to use that word. That's their...
It's usually a bad sign.
Yeah, I would think so. They're going to co-opt it in some way, but we have to not let them.
Sorry, but actually that's true. There are a lot of things that aren't working, and there are some fairly, I wouldn't call them easy, but practicable ways of dealing with some of these problems, all these dysfunctionalities of the system. I was telling Jay last time we visited that almost every 4 years, whatever it is, when the Farm Bill comes up, I write a comment, of course, criticizing the insane, illogical structure of subsidies and insurance programs and crop subsidies and conservation credits and all the rest. And every time I write a comment, I talk about we need to reward those farmers who are providing not just ecosystem services, but economic-based services. And if you did that, we would begin to have more equity in our agricultural economy, where smallholders would have a little foot up, not much, but it would help us to be getting payments for ecosystem services. I don't like the idea, if it's true, of some hedge fund manager up in Manhattan controlling 100,000 acres over the country, all over the country, and picking up a bunch of USDA support. That's just dysfunctional, it's inequitable, and it has historically had a racist impact on people of color. That's why we had Keep Siegel and Garcia and all the other lawsuits against the USDA. So the dysfunction, what's not working, is a predatory economy. I'd like to compare that to something else that we've talked about today. The mycelium group talked about this notion of solidarity. And actually what our work is, we're rebuilding a solidarity economy in San Luis. And we're learning some lessons that I think apply elsewhere in terms of things like what are the governance norms of such a movement, of such an economy. And I like to compare the solidarity economy. It's not what you use to become individually wealthy, it's what you do to create community wealth. And that's very different from the predatory economy of that the USDA and the land grant colleges and the corporations have created over the last, since the Merrill Act at least, right? So they've been around a while too. And those are institutions that were part of settler colonialism, like prior appropriation, the Homestead Act, and the General Mining Act, as Charles Wilkerson taught us that so many years ago in his work. And so when I think about all of this and these really deep-rooted structural dysfunctions, I have to remind people it's actually not dysfunctional. It's working exactly what it was designed to do, to exploit the planet, to exploit the soil, to exploit farm labor, mostly undocumented and mostly indigenous. They go back here longer than any of us. I mean, this is their homeland. Indigenous people from Mexico, Guatemala, wherever, they've been on this side of the planet for thousands of years. And so, but we need to think about what does it mean to say the system's actually not broken. It's functioning the way those powers that designed it, they organized it that way. And so therefore, that's why it's so wrong. It's not working for us. I would just say this, for ourselves, at least in San Luis, and I'm so heartened to hear you talk about the acequia. I like to tell people we're prior to prior. Coffin versus left-handed, what the hell kind of history lesson does the Supreme Court need? I talked to Justice Hobbs about this, and he agreed with me. That was a wrongfully thought out decision because it basically said that the only water law true to place in Colorado was prior appropriation, erasing all the deep history of acequia customary law, which is a lot more communal and more concerned about your neighbor and about sharing scarcity and one irrigator, one vote. Look, about 10 years ago, maybe longer, the Ditch and Reservoir Company Alliance of Colorado came and did their annual gathering in San Luis for a reason, because like you were saying, they see good ideas in how we govern ourselves as acequias, as institutions of collective action, of the water as a commonwealth rather than as private property that can be sold uphill toward money. So we can fix this. Now, not everyone can become an acequia. Now, we can't get all romantic about this either. We have our own contradictions, defections to neoliberal sensitivities. People no longer sharing the water in San Luis, wanting their share and saying, oh, I'm older than you. And, they were indoctrinated under a prior doctrine that was dysfunctional, but there for 100 years, between the left-hand ditch decision and the acequia recognition law of 2009. It was almost 100 years between those. That did a lot of damage to our cultural norms and values. So don't think it's that easy to just, oh yeah, even in the acequia community, there's a lot wrong with the dysfunction of people who have defected to neoliberal instead of communitary values. And so be aware that I think all our communities will face those sort of binaries, and our solution is to create a hybrid that respects people's private interests, but is really about organizing the community assets in a way that they have an obligation to community as well, rather than just to themselves. One way we're doing that at the San Luis People's Market is to set up a rebate for, not just for the workers, to set up a profit sharing system for the workers is what they want, but then for the customers to set up a rebate for them, like REI kind of, but it'll be different. You can earn those rebates also by doing labor, volunteer work, rather than paying money for groceries. It's a very flexible idea. That is a solution to, I think, the toxic economy that we're all forced into. And it's global, and it doesn't really care about your land and water. It doesn't care whether your children and future generations eat well or not. It just wants to commodify everything. That's all. Everything's a thing for sale, as the Zapatistas say, except for indigenous dignity. And that's what we can use to create our own community movement, to continue growing this food sovereignty movement as a community of accomplices. Gracias, Doctor.
Thank you, Sub-Commander Pena.
So my next question is, what are any gaps in aggregation, distribution, storage, and logistics that we might need to work on?
Okay, I'm going to jump in really quick. So there's a lot of food that comes from Colorado down to Albuquerque, New Mexico on a La Montanita co-op truck. Like a lot of potatoes, a lot of peaches, a lot of quinoa, and it goes past Taos. I have a farm-to-table restaurant, Farmhouse Cafe, and the lunch program, and it goes all the way down to Albuquerque, and then I order it from La Montanita, and then it drives back up to Taos. And so I really feel that there's a way that maybe Taos, because we're actually starting to get more of a food hub going with storage, dry storage, refrigeration, freezer, that we could start to participate a little bit more in changing how that structure works, and also back to the producer cooperative model rather than always the consumer.
Beautiful. So your questions about gap in infrastructure, yeah, and you talked about all those things. I feel like refrigeration is huge, and the trucking, having these inefficiencies of trucks running empty, and how we can create a network of trucks that we are all taking advantage of one direction or the other so that we can share this food in our food sheds. But you didn't talk about the human capital, and I just want to say that at the Local Foods Coalition and what I hear about, you could be doing more and more and more. I mean, I feel that, we have built the Local Foods Coalition up to a staff of 30-some, and everybody, we have to work hard on work-life balance. And I call on all of you out there to get involved, because this is a heavy lift. If we're going to do this and be successful, we need everybody participating, and we need, the food hub is desperate for aggregators and such, and we just really need participation from our community in these food systems so that we're all, many hands make for light work. And I also want to say that, the fossil fuel based trucking is got to change. And we have a beautiful project in Moscow where we were funded by the Environmental Protection Agency to be creating some biofuels out of cold potatoes and used fryer oils and such that we're collecting as we make these rounds. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to close the circles and be creating fuel from the biofuels of our, the biomass of our food system, and creating, that food waste going into providing a fuel for these trucks. And so there's just a lot out there that's a big challenge, and the more that come together to make this happen, the better. And I'm really thankful for Ginny Ducal here and her beautiful community garden. I just want to give a shout out when you were talking about, too. All right.
Thanks, Liza. That was great. So, we need more of all of it. And one thing that I think about as an easy first step is creating community food refrigeration and storage, where all the farmers in that community can drop off their products, and then the people in the community can come and pick it up. That's one easy solution. We don't do it very often. Everybody has their own little facility, or they're trying to raise money to buy their own refrigeration units and their own trucks to be able to move the food to the people. Just because of the work that I'm doing, I'll just touch on this piece of the Colorado Land Link program. Is a program within a small nonprofit in one county of the state. We work statewide, and it's me and an AmeriCorps volunteer trying to do this statewide land linking work. And we need a lot more people. And we need this to be happening in each of the regional communities because I'll go to the southeast part of the state. I have a workshop with Ogallala Commons in a couple weeks, and it takes a long time to build that trust. Nobody, they're not that interested in having me connect them to farmers. People want to connect to one another. And so if we have more people doing this work of trying to look for available land and connect farmers to the available land, that would be just an amazing thing within the state to have more of that happening. It happens in other states, and in Colorado, we don't have a big enough entity really to take it on, or we don't have, we're not connecting all the different regions in a way that's functional. So it's a little bit off of that like infrastructure, but it's all connected because land is one of the biggest pieces of this whole puzzle. And we just need to keep thinking about that fact of like, you have people say no one wants to farm anymore, and that is not true whatsoever. We have a ton of interested farmers out there who really just, they get going and they do exactly what I said earlier about that farmer who had to move is moving every year to restart her business. And you can do that maybe when you're in your 20s, but each year it gets harder to do. And it really, we just need that collective will and that collective effort of working together to overcome all these pieces.
You can't move your soil, and that's what you do is you build soil over time. Elaine, who owns the grocery store over here, she told me a story about a strange thing that's happened. She's opened a grocery store. People have now rely on it. You can come to the grocery store anytime and get everything you need. But when she was growing up here in this town, I don't know how long ago that was, but it was, let's say, 40 years ago, there were root cellars. People had big freezers. So there's this false sense of security that needs to be considered. If these grocery stores weren't here or this food was not coming in every day, 1 week without the trucks coming down the road and everyone in Crestone is hungry. So build a root cellar.
Yeah, the Suterrano's a really old tradition. I remember about 26 years ago, some poor Colorado college students came with me on a field trip to Joe Gallegos' farm and by hand dug out a root cellar. When we hit that Alamosa clay lens, it was really hard going, but it built a lot of solidarity between the Gallegos family and the CC students. One of the things that I just want to briefly mention and close with today is that I think all of us in one way or another have mentioned how important the relationality part is. So even when you're doing with infrastructure, there are relationships to be developed. And a lot of them are not going to be with local people. In order to make the market conform to health code, we have to invest in $60,000 worth of refrigeration, a new walk-in fresh produce cooler, a new walk-in meat freezer, new frozen food, and all of that. But the most important investment, including the physical investment of 2 volcanic rock corn mills, a tortilla press, a tortilla oven, that's kind of like the easy part, even though you've got a 6-month wait on some of these items given the current supply chains, which I think is largely contrived, by the way. But we're always going to be depending on getting to that moment of full autonomy and self-reliance. I'm a critical realist, so in order to be self-reliant, we first have to rely on a lot of actors in a global economy, and we're very aware of that. I don't know anyone here that can build me a 3-section refrigerated work table for the butcher shop, right? And the one that's there is partly made of wood. It's not up to code, right? So I got to deal with a walk-in meat freezer that was built in the 1940s, largely out of wood, right? And I think the the Colorado Department of Health and the Environment has been very kind in not shutting down the market over the last 100 years because they, or at least more recently, they understand what would be a food junkyard. By the way, don't stop using the term food desert. A lot of food in the desert, if you're native, you know exactly what's out there. You're not going to go hungry. Junkyard food, even junkyards still have good qualities, right? You can find that rare John Deere bolt that you needed to repair your old tractor. So food apartheid is another term that's used, by the way. But for us, that's the easy part. And it's challenging enough to get all that refrigeration in the building. What's really the challenge for us, and not just the refrigeration, but the tortilla operation, the restaurant deli, all of the rest, that equipment, the commercial kitchen, is for a local deep foods incubator, right? So it has a different function, not just as part of the market selling prepared foods. The hardest part is the relationships and the apprenticing that has to happen. It's not easy to operate a volcanic rock corn mill. That's why everybody uses metal augers. You know, the last thing you want is a few flakes of that volcanic rock to go into your masa harina, a whole batch. It's an easy way to go bankrupt. And that's why the industry depends on metal augers, not volcanic rock. But I grew up with volcanic rock tortillas on the U.S.-Mexico border in Laredo, where I was born and raised, and community founded in 1755. And the tortilla there was always processed with volcanic rock corn mills, molinos. And let me tell you, there's a huge difference. But who's going to run it? Right? We don't. That's something that's a missing bit of the cultural memory of San Luis, because people there, they had mills, stone ground mills, but they were for wheat, not for corn tortillas. And the corn tortilla is a very unique volcanic rock. It's not the same as what you would use for other stone ground grains, right? Including wheat. By the way, I don't believe in purism, like being too pure about anything. And so we've identified a traditional Sonoran white flour that was introduced to New Mexico during the colonial period. So we're not so essentialist that we can't accept something good out of that culture, but it's low gluten, naturally. I think the problem with gluten intolerance is due to the fact that the phytogenetic biodiversity of wheat has been shrunk to like less than 0.001% of what used to be there. Think about that for a moment. And all the science that I'm familiar with shows that as you reduce phytochemical diversity, you're creating all manner openings for chronic disease, and like diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular, and all the rest. So we need to decolonize our own wheat, too, turns out. But we do want to have a capacity to do the volcanic rock production of stone ground white flour, the Sonoran white. But that's still not enough. Who's going to run it? And I think one of the keys, if you look at the research literature and the self-evaluation literature of the co-op movement, and we're kind of an interesting hybrid because the farmer co-op, the producer co-op, is part of this set of four institutions that we're reviving. And the market is just sort of like a space where people can do incubator work, but it's also a place where we can directly get off the farm food to our local community and into the wider valley networks. Again, that's actually the easy part. The hard part is the next generation that's going to run that molino, that's going to run the co-op, that's going to be an acequia farmer. Preparing that next generation is the real challenge. And that takes very deep relationships and a certain kind of spirituality, even understanding how sacred these first foods are to us, because these are our first foods.
Okay. So my last thing here is what's the last thing you want to leave these people with? Like what's the message you have? And then where can they find you or get involved with you or support you?
Grow food.
Join us. I think, you can connect to any one of us here You can volunteer, you can work for any of our organizations, and you can tell other people about all of us and what we're doing and just continue to spread the word. Yeah, I'll leave it with that.
I will share the permaculture creed of people care, earth care, fair share. And I'm going to share my favorite saying by Nelson Mandela. All these are not my words, but we must take care of the old ones, for they've come a long way. And we must take care of the young ones, for they have a long way to go. And we must take care of each other, for we have much work to do. Aho.
Well, I'm going to be practical and say that we need our kids to be growing. We need to teach them in the schools. We need to teach them in our yards. We need to take them to the farm. We need to grow seeds. They're really good seed growers. And I think that we didn't really touch so much on seed today, but I think everything we're talking about, that's an underlying resource that we need to protect. And we need to buy food from farmers, from your CSA. If you shop at the market, like ask for what's local. You know, everyone, I mean, veritable vegetable, I think even comes here. Like there's so much natural food everywhere that you have to really be specific. Like we want local, and really find out what that is. And I'd say talk to some farmers and find out what they need. You know, if you've got a 401k, think about divesting that and helping somebody with some infrastructure, because we've really got to help the young people. Thank you.
Another Bill Mollison quote is, divest from the stock market, invest in your community. And seeds, that is one corn seed right there. The exponential growth energy produced from one seed is phenomenal. So you can do amazing things with a few seeds.
I'm too lost to be found anyway. She knows how to get a hold of me. I'll end with a very brief question for all of us. Ask yourself every day, am I being a good ancestor?
Okay, well, one other thing I want to do is just shout out to the Elephant Cloud and the Cresto Mercantile, because they do a great job at providing food to this community. And again, to this panel for coming from as far as they have, and in the middle of like a kind of important time of year for being on the farm. Thank you guys so much. And again, if you want to talk to them or sign up or get more in touch, come down to the booth down at the end of the park over there and see them. So thanks a lot.
And I just want to give a shout out to Jay for, she did an awesome job, but also she's responsible for the SLV seed exchange, and it does all start with seed. So thanks, Jay.